welcome to episode 15 of Broken. Today we're going to be talking about burnout and spotting the signs of burnout. So I suppose what is burnout?
So for me, burnout is stress to the point that stress gets too much. So it's an overwhelming feeling of stress where I don't think burnout happens instantly. I think it happens gradually over a period of time. You may take on too much. You may do too much. You may not invest in that much, self-care. It could be linked to working hours. You might be going for a promotion or something. It might be higher volume of commitments with work, or it could be things at home. Maybe you're living in a very stressful home environment, or you're a new mum and you've got sleepless nights and things like that. So there could be a number of contributing factors, but ultimately I think it's something that builds up over a period of time to the point that it gets unbearable.
You can't deal with it.
Yeah,
I think we've all kind of been there a little bit, haven't we?
Through different points of your life.
Different things happening, because different things mean different things at different points and different times of your life. Like things that might stress us out today might not have stressed us out a year ago, and vice versa. So there's not like a set code of what makes you burn out, is there?
No, and you might be more susceptible to burnout at different points of your life.
Different times of the month for women, really.
Or having children. I think work's a big one as well, isn't it? There'll be certain times where you might want to progress in your career and you might take on too much, or you might have back-to-back meetings as well as things at home, and it might just all get a little bit too much.
I think a lot of that as well with work can be you take on that little bit extra, and then that little bit extra and that little bit extra, and you don't actually know. It might not be that you're going for a big promotion or something like that, but you're just building those. You're taking on more and more responsibility really gradually, and without really talking to anybody about it, and thinking you can manage and you can't manage, and then it gets to a point where everything's too much.
I agree. And I think the same kind of idea, but in a home life situation. So it might be that you love socializing with friends and you like to get together with the kids and go and do various social things, or without the kids, and it might get to a point where you're doing too much. You're saying yes to all of these things, and it's getting to the point that your social battery has run out and you've drained it, and you just need a little bit of time alone. But you might not realize that at the time, because you might be a sociable person, you might be quite extroverted, you might want to be out doing all these things, but the burnout of that would come with it all just getting way too much, not sleeping, not...
And there's those little signs, I think, I find, when it's like more of a social burnout or more of like the children's burnout rather than work. I think for me, I think it's quite obvious when it's getting too much, and you can kind of shut it off and close the door a little bit and maybe speak to somebody, or however you need to deal with that. But I think at home, because you're constantly surrounded by it and it's your environment constantly, it's harder to kind of notice, isn't it?
It creeps in.
And I think it creeps in with me. Maybe my anger levels go a bit higher, so I could feel I'm a bit tired today, and I could feel myself kind of walking around the house before I came here, looking at the kids' bedrooms and picking stuff up off the floor, and like thinking about how much stuff I've got to do later, which is just home stuff. So like washing and ironing and cleaning, and because we're single women, you've got to do it yourself, and nobody else will do it. So it's like,
and the kids won't do it.
No, so you're walking around your house like just sort of like snapping at yourself. Oh God, this he's doing. Oh, why can't they do this? Why can't they do that? And I was like, oh, just rein it in a little bit, because otherwise you're going to be dead angry when they come home, and then you're going to be this like angry force of a woman, and they're going to be like, oh God, I don't want to go and spend any time with her. But you can feel it. You can feel those little creeps, can't you?
Yeah. So you've literally just explained what I was like yesterday. My son walked through the door, and he'd rung the doorbell like 5 times and then been whacking on the window. So the instant welcome home was me like going, do not do that. Do not bang on the door that many times. Do not do this. And straight away already feeling. And I think definitely being more irritable, being less patient, I suppose going from 0 to 60 as opposed to just feeling more irritable, really.
Yeah, the irritability,
Irritability,
isn't it?
yeah.
That's for me, that's how I
Who's
feel.
managing to push your buttons and things that might not have bothered you previously. So I came off my antidepressants at the end of last year, and one of the side effects is being more irritable, which I've definitely been experiencing that. I'm usually quite a calm and level-headed person, but I've noticed that, you know, things do stress you out though, don't they? I'm trying not to see it as a negative. I'm trying to see it as, you know, I'm just more in tune to how I'm feeling, into my surroundings, what's going on. Whereas for a period of time, I did feel quite numb. I'm definitely not feeling numb anymore.
Yeah, but don't you think, because I've been in sort of the same situation, it was a few years ago when I went on antidepressants and then I came off them eventually. And I think because you've been in that sort of numb, not numb, but kind of slightly numb state where your emotions are managed subconsciously and you're not really acting and taking them on board, then it makes you more aware of those feelings and changes in your personality. Now you're out at the other side. So like today when I was thinking to myself and snapping around and I was like, God, don't stop, calm down, stop it, because that's going to have this reaction, it's going to make these people feel like that. Whereas before, I think I didn't really have that emotional regulation. No, I didn't really,
because it was
think in my head about how any of this would. So actually, it's kind of a bit of a blessing that I think that you've got that knowledge of reaction.
Yeah, and had the knowledge before, but it's just been suppressed for a while because I've been on them for a period.
Yeah, but I don't I don't think I had a massive awareness of that before I went on to the antidepressants. I think the antidepressants stopping me having those feelings and then them weaning back in made me more conscious of them and more aware of them and more able to regulate them and spot them, I suppose.
More in tune, yeah.
Yeah.
So what symptoms have you personally felt when you've been on the verge of a burnout?
Yeah, so irritability, like we just talked about, definitely one of them. Tiredness, exhaustion, really.
It's not just a bit tired.
It's not just a bit tired, it's exhaustion throughout the day. To the point where you feel a little bit teary and a bit like, I don't know, I'm gonna cope, or I'll get to a point during the day where it probably gets to about 2 o'clock and I'll need a nap. And that isn't me normally.
No.
But when those little bits of tiredness start creeping back in during the day, when I feel like I need to have a little bit of sleep, that is a big clue to me that I need to change something, or I've done too much, or
one of my instant symptoms is that I really, really struggle to get out of bed in the morning. And I know you can say that different points of the year, seasonally and things like that. But for me personally, I'm normally quite good at getting up in the morning. So when that sneaks in, I think that is I don't want to get out of bed because I don't want to face what's going on today. And that's when I know personally that there's something not great, because it doesn't just feel a little bit of an effort. I've snoozed my alarm a number of times and it's a complete, I want to avoid the day. I want to like hide in my bed. So that's one of the main physical things, and that is linked to exhaustion. One of the things,
I think subconsciously as well with me, when I'm getting into that sort of burnout phase, is I knowingly avoid
certain things.
So I knowingly avoid probably like procrastination, I suppose, where something's building up or something's niggling at you in the background and you need to deal with it, or it's going to be an issue, but you're kind of just pushing it aside. And I think that's a big sign for me as well.
I used to do that all the time, to the point that so usually money things I would just avoid even thinking about it, because then
I wouldn't even let it enter my brain.
Wouldn't even look in my bank, wouldn't even check things, because I'd be like, I'm just going to pretend that's not even happening. I'm just going to carry on as normal. So that avoidance. And one of my things is like washing. I flipping hate washing and ironing. So that would be one thing that I would avoid, and then it would build up and I would just see this huge ironing pile. I'm onto it now because that's something that does stress me out, and if I see it, it's almost like a little bit of a trigger. So I try and do it gradually. But one of my big things is the physical tension that I feel in my body. So my neck, my shoulders, my back, I hold tension here. And when I've really worked on my meditation, one of the big things is like, doing a big shrug and then releasing it down.
Yeah.
And whenever I used to have massages, which I've not had one in a while, it used to be like, she used to pull my arm to try and get my shoulders to come down, because she's like, shoulders literally up to your ears. And I think it was just, it's like a monkey on your back, monkey on your shoulders, isn't it? This feeling of this tension and immediately being on pins, or almost like preempting the worst.
Yeah.
So I think that the emotional stress feeds into the physical stress. So if you're constantly worried, anxious, fearing the worst, feeling overwhelmed, your body's in a heightened state of arousal, isn't it? You're in this fear state where you're thinking that something bad's going to happen.
Yeah.
And then you're quick to jump into it. And I'll see that I do that with the kids. So I'll be like, don't do that because you might fall, or don't, you're in there straight away because you're already in that
anxious state.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think as well with me, like when I've been really burnt out in the past and doing that avoidance thing, so it might have been like the worst case situations of when you're getting divorced or when you're going through a divorce or whatever. And I remember pushing so much to the back of my head and trying to just, because it's hard to focus on what you're doing in the present when you're really burnt out and you're really sort of in that depressive sort of low state, that I think I was having some sort of argument or phone conversation that I was kind of avoiding, and it got to the point during the conversation that I was so worked up and so, but not crying, but my throat would just not, it was closing up, it wouldn't let the words out. Like it's such a physical, it's so weird to think that there's such a physical like reaction in your body that you can't control and you don't know how to control it. It's crazy.
So you just touched on some of it then. When one of the questions, when can you experience it or are most likely to experience it? So major life events, it might be getting married, can be very stressful. Getting divorced can be very stressful. Moving house, having children, a bereavement, or a serious illness. All those life events can really impose stress, can't they? And things that are completely out of your control. Lots of things to organise, a lot of things to do, a lot of emotional involvement in all of that. And I think you're definitely more susceptible to experiencing burnout when one of those a big life event's happening.
And sometimes that it's easy to see and spot, because say if somebody dies or something like that and it's something that's automatically like a sad depressive thing, then you go straight into a state, and then everybody's kind of aware that you're in that state, and it's easy kind of to manage. Well, it might not be easy to manage because you don't know how to manage yourself, but people who are around you are aware of that situation. Whereas if it's a slow build up to a burnout situation, that maybe something like a wedding where it's a happy thing, it's very exciting, or you've had kids, that's very happy and exciting, but the build up to it and the organizing or the gradual looking after of somebody else and having somebody else in your life all the time, like, can be really slow to build up and be a burnout. So it's harder to spot around you, I think, as well, isn't it? So it's harder for people to understand that you need help. Whereas those big life events that are sad and depressive, like, people are there ready, aren't they? But the happier things that lead to burnout, kind of, that's harder to
and
manage.
I think there's a more understanding of that during that state of burnout. If there's been it's a negative experience, it is a more understanding that you would need deep rest and you would need time alone. Whereas when it's planning for like a wedding, I think there's this whole kind of, I should be really happy about this. I should be really enjoying this, and almost like a bit of guilt that you're not actually enjoying it because it's really stressful and you're finding it.
But that's like how postnatal depression gets like undiagnosed or I suppose like hidden, isn't it? Because you were like, there's a bit of shame to that. So you're like, should be loving this. It should be like the best day of my life. I should be like, why am I not so maternal and all that? But and it gets hidden because it's not. So you think that society is not going to accept the fact that you're not happy, or you're burning out and you're not excited, or you're struggling, or because it's not seen to be great to ask for help, is it?
And I think, so one of the questions we've got here is about, can you push through it? Is it good to push through when you're in that state of on the verge of burning out? Is it positive to be able to just push through it, and will you get through it at the other end? I personally feel that that's the worst thing that you can do, just from my personal experience.
And that's kind of how that is like the definition of burnout, really, isn't it? Like trying to push through a situation when you can't manage it.
Yeah. But I think, sometimes we get told, just keep going. Just keep going. It's going to get better. It's going to get easier. It's not going to be like this forever.
Yeah.
But by not giving yourself that time to rest, and not just a little bit of rest, like deep rest, that's why you're on the verge of completely burning out. And I've been at fault from doing this before, thinking, I'm just going to, part of it's avoidance. I'm going to pretend that it's not really happening. I'm going to overpower it with positivity, like toxic positivity,
Yeah, we do get
by
like that,
getting
don't we?
so busy. I'm just going to be that busy that I'm not even going to think about it. And I think sometimes I felt like it served a purpose. So, say, like going through a divorce or going through a stressful situation, not stopping to have to think about it means that it's procrastination, but it's procrastination on such a level that you're going to be so busy doing everything else apart from dealing with the
Thinking
task
about
at
that.
hand.
Yeah.
And then that builds up to the point that it's unbearable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's like it's talking to people, isn't it? And I suppose we always have these conversations where things like burnout, I think sometimes the only way you're going to get out of that is by accepting help from other people.
Yeah.
Even if it's not someone's going to come around and do your ironing, or someone's going to come around and, help you manage a workload. Just having those conversations with somebody about how you feel
Yeah.
offloads that sort of a big part of it, doesn't it?
And it's self-acceptance as well. I think we can link into perfectionism in all of this. There's this shame in asking for help, asking for support, admitting defeat, and saying, you know what, I'm actually really struggling at the moment. I'm finding it really difficult. Maybe that's by going to a member of staff in work and saying, I've taken on too much. I need more support. I need more time. I can't possibly do this. And that initial conversation for so many people can feel completely overwhelming, can make you feel like a failure. Same with things at home, if you're struggling with the kids or struggling with day-to-day things, then to take that first step and actually admit that you are really struggling, I think that's the hardest step that you can take.
It is, and it's such a massive load off your shoulders, that first initial conversation where you're like, look, something's not right. Like, I need some help. I don't know how that help's going to happen, because sometimes you can't see a way out of it, can you? And you can't understand how it could change or get better in any way, and you procrastinate about that. You're like, well, this is never going to change. This is just my life now, and this is how it has to be. But even from your lowest low, where you think, God, it's never going to get any better. Like, every day is different, and every situation is different, and you grow and you gain skills during those situations, so that when you go into those situations in the future, you have skills to manage them and you kind of understand them. So it's like a bit of a learning curve, isn't it? And I suppose that's where, like, men's depression sometimes is maybe not, it's obviously not dealt with as much, which we know about, but maybe that's because they don't have those, a lot of men don't have those social circles where they're able to have those open discussions with people, whereas we're fortunate and lucky that we can just be like, look, like, I'm struggling, help me.
So that might be quite a nice one then. So how can you help others who are suffering?
So how could you spot, like, so it's spotting it, really, because you can always help. Like, somebody comes to you and asks for help, then you help them in whatever way you can. But I suppose for me it's more spotting it, like spotting changes in people's behavior, maybe, or like that, because I've been in that and you've been in that state where you get to such a point where you feel like you're in a bubble, and you feel like you're in that numb state, and you can't process every day, because it just isn't something that your brain can cope with, because you're so stressed out. You've got so much in your head that's stressful, and you're not dealing with any of it. So for that, it's those changes in their behavior. So looking and acting very, like, distant, I think, is such a huge thing. Like, looking drained, not actively socializing, obviously not actively socializing, but you can kind of see it in the group chats that we have sometimes. Like, someone will go a little bit quiet, and then you'll be like, well, I don't think that person's okay this week, and just like asking those questions, like, are you all right? They might just turn around and be like, oh yeah, sorry, I've been really busy, I've got this,
Yeah,
this. Or they might turn around and be like, you know what, actually I'm really not okay. So it's being able to understand people's behaviour a little bit more, I think.
Yeah, and recognizing like non-verbal cues. So it's the typical thing, isn't it? You ask someone how they are, you say it all the time, how are you? How are you feeling? And the response is, I'm fine. And often that, so for me, I don't think anyone would have realized I wasn't being sullen, I wasn't being distant, I was being the opposite. Whenever I've burnt out, I've gone and tried to overpower it. So I think you can either, my mum will say it to me now sometimes, she's like, oh, do you not think you're doing a little bit too much?
Yeah.
Do you know, so it might be that if you've got a close connection with someone and, you know, you're trying to do too much, that person's trying to do too much. You know, it might be a gentle, shall we just do a chilled evening, or shall we just do this instead, or do you not think, or do you want a little bit of help with that? So it could be that kind of behavior, or like you say, it could be withdrawn, very forgetful, I think is one of them.
Forgetful, my goodness, that was something I really suffered with.
It's because you're mentally overwhelmed.
And it creeps, I can see that creeping in. That's one of the things that when I can't remember stuff and I'm like, oh God, I've got this. Like, why have I not remembered? That's when I'm like, right,
I'd need
exhausted.
to, that's exactly what I do. I think, oh, I've forgotten something. I hate, and now I put it in my phone, I put it in a diary, I try and get organized, because then when it's something creeps in like that, then that's another really big trigger.
Yeah. And I remember like someone picking up on it, because I used to be like really on it with like all the school stuff with the kids and making things and helping with the projects and blah blah blah. And so one of my friends just being like, how have you not remembered? Like, you're the person that remembers everything.
Yeah.
And is always on it, and you've not remembered anything. And I was like, yeah, that's because I'm not all right.
Yeah. Whereas I'm the opposite. I'm like, I don't even know that. So I suppose maybe trying to think about how you could avoid burnout. So we've talked about symptoms, we've talked about recognizing the signs, but how can you personally, how would you now, knowing that, so for me, I've experienced burnout before, so I can recognize the signs when it's creeping in.
So it's about recognizing those signs and being able to make changes in your behavior, isn't it?
And if you're feeling like that, what can you do? So for me, exercise is a really good one. Making sure I just go to bed earlier, not staying up later watching the telly, because I think, right, that although that's resting, it's not like deep rest, need to go to sleep. One of my things is, I notice it, like I am quite extroverted, but I can be introverted as well. And sometimes my social battery has completely drained. And I'm like, do you know what? I just need to not go to public places with the kids because it's so stressful. I'm just going to stay at home with them, and I'm just going to do something that's more low-key and more relaxing, rather than being in that go, go, go. Everything's busy. We're going to do something every single weekend. And I'm mentally and physically exhausted. So I think it's good to just take a step back when you're experiencing that. Yeah,
there's lots of things I like to do. I think it's all about doing something that brings you joy, isn't it, really? Obviously deep rest is important and all the things that lead to you resting. But for me, it's doing something I enjoy, which is very simple things like cooking. So, but like I did it today. I was really tired today, but I was like, I just feel like I need some healthy food. I need something in my body, because I've been away last week working, and then I've kind of not really done a proper shop. And when you just sort of, you're living off those little bits of food, or like the leftovers of what you were going to cook for the tea for the kids and stuff, and it's not really what you want or what you need. So I was like, I'm just going to go, I'm going to get some stuff to make some soup, and I'm going to make some soup. And that's just, it's like an hour of just, it's a bit like meditation, isn't it? You're just going through the motions. If you're cooking something, it's quiet, and you at the end of it, you're going to have a really good product, and you can eat it, and it's going to be tasty, and then you've got it for the future. So you know that you're putting goodness into your body. So things like that, a bit of cooking, are really nice. I love going to we've got a really good gym, but it's got an outside hot tub, which if you sit on one side of it, you can see the trees down the back. So I just love to go and have like half an hour there if I'm feeling a bit stressed. Maybe not even go to the gym and exercise, just go sit there in the quiet and the outside and look at the trees, and that's something I like to do. Have a bath, like have a nice warm bath. Don't make enough time for baths, I think.
No, I think when I've been in when I've reached burnout and I've been in a really heightened state of arousal, I sometimes find it really difficult to sit and just not do anything. So I used to do jigsaws because my mind was actively doing something, but it was a focused activity. Do it reading, because even if I was watching the television, I would still be having to do something in my hand, like scrolling on social media or something. So reading a book, I find really good to help me just completely switch off from the outside world and focus on the present moment. Doing a jigsaw, colouring, something that I'm still doing, but I'm
it's something
focused.
that, and it brings you joy
Cooking
as well.
So I suppose it's like mindfulness activities, because we're all different. Some people really struggle to meditate and really struggle just to sit and be quiet, and that point scares people so much because all the thoughts that they don't want start creeping in. Whereas actually, if you do it, a couple of minutes here and there, it's fine. It's going to be okay. But I think it's if meditation really isn't suited for you at that moment in time, it might be doing something like yoga so that you're active, but you're focusing on different parts of your body when you're doing it, or meditation, but it might be a body scan meditation. So it's actively getting you to focus on different parts of your body and reduce your tension.
And also like one of the big things about burnout is that you're procrastinating and you're putting stuff off. So sometimes someone told me about sitting for 5 minutes and setting a timer, or 10 minutes or something. And it could be to do with grief. So if you're grieving and you're struggling with grieving, or it could be a loss of a partner, or a relationship breakdown, or a friendship breakdown, or whatever it is, but it's bothering you and you're putting it to the back of your mind. Instead about putting on your favorite song or setting a timer and having some sad music that you're going to react to, taking that time to just sit, listen, grieve, cry, whatever you need to do, and then your timer finishes at 5 minutes and you turn it off and then you go about your day, because you need to let that stuff out, even though you might not want to. And they said about with things that maybe like money worries or home worries, or things that you're actually worried about that you pushing, you try not to think about because you feel like they're going to suffocate you, setting that timer for 10 minutes, getting a pen and paper and writing them all down. And then maybe the day after, the next 10 minutes is looking at one of them and thinking, what could I do with that, just for 10 minutes, and then shutting off again, so that you feel like you're slowly decluttering that bit of your mind.
They do that on CBT, cognitive behavioural therapy, don't they? Yeah, they do. And so you can set it as worry time. So when thoughts start creeping in throughout the day, you just park it and you say, right, I'm not going to think about that now. I'm going to think about it tonight. I'm going to do it, wouldn't do it straight away before bed because you won't want to get yourself really stressed out, but maybe pick a time in the afternoon or when you get in from work or whatever. 5 o'clock, for example, and set that time. And what you'll find is that the thoughts that you've really been worrying about, when it actually comes to thinking about them, they've dissolved a little bit. They're not actually as bad as what you thought they were. Same idea with a pen and paper by the side of your bed. If you're really struggling with sleep and you're worrying about it, you get up, you write it down, I'll park that and I'll deal with it in the morning when I wake up. Because that's then it's a vicious cycle, isn't it? Where you can't sleep because you're stressed, and then you're more exhausted because you've not slept. And it just feeds through like that.
So having that time to just forcing yourself to have that time to think about those things, but you controlling it a little bit, so you know that you only have to do it for 10 minutes, and then it could be half an hour, or like just easing yourself into those situations where it's uncomfortable feelings, isn't it? And you've got to deal with them because they're not going to go away.
No,
but it's really difficult to actually deal with them.
And I think burnout is a very, very lonely place to be in, and you've usually got there on your own in a very isolated place. So you've got there by ignoring things personally, by not talking about it to people, by carrying on as normal as if you're okay when really actually you're not. So by making the decision that you're not okay, and by just speaking to one person and involving them in the action plan, because it's probably, if you could have sorted it out yourself, well, you would have done. So by speaking to a family member or someone that you really trust, someone that you really respect, it's often my mum. I'll usually have a little bit of a breakdown, a little bit of a meltdown. I'll be like, Mum, can you just come round and just help me? I just need to sort stuff out. So it might be like sorting stuff out to do with admin. It might be sorting stuff out to do with things around the house, like things that have just built up and you just want to get it done. So yeah, getting someone to help, or just maybe making you a little bit more accountable. So rather than procrastinating, it might be, for example, that your spare room has gradually over time been overloaded with so much crap that you can't even open the door anymore. So that has just gradually over time built up and built up and built up because it's become the dumping ground where everything has got, and you can't actually face it. You don't want to go in there. You don't want to look at it. So you're going to call in a friend and you're going to go around there and you're just going to get it sorted together.
Yeah.
You're going to do it with somebody else. You're going to make a brew. You're going to put some music on. That is a much less scary place to be than going in there on your own, admitting that you've caused all that mess and you need to fix it.
Yeah. Yeah, because burnout is isolating, isn't it? Like you said, and it can like lead to massive breakdowns in communication with your like we've seen it loads of times with like people's marriages and partners, because you're not having those discussions, you're not talking about the things initially that bother you, then they build up and build up and build up into these huge things that can't be dealt with because you've got such disdain to them that you just can't deal with it anymore. And friendships and things like that, like something that's bothering you might be very small, but it can build up and build up and build up, and then before you know it, you've isolated yourself from that person and you've spoilt that relationship, and you can't get back from it.
I agree completely.
We looked at there was a scientific thing that said about, it was called the 42% rule. 42
rule, which was the, go on, you explain it.
Yeah, so it looked like it was 42% of your, if it's anything over 42% of your time, is it below what you would?
So it's to do with when you've reached burnout,
okay,
you need to then spend 42% of your time investing in deep breath.
Yes.
So 42% of 24 hours.
Which was 10 hours out of 24, wasn't it?
Yeah, that's what you said it was. Yeah, we'll look at
10 hours out of 24 hours need to be
deep rest.
Deep rest.
But that deep rest, we were saying, you know, obviously you might be, gosh, if you're really, really stressed and you can sleep, it might be that you're sleeping for 14 hours at a time if you're getting into a really bad state. But maybe it's not. Maybe your form of deep rest is going to be like emotional support that you might have from somebody else, just being able to talk and you know, release that valve and just get it all out and cry and scream and shout. It might be sleep, it might be reading, it might be having that creative flair by colouring, cooking, things like that. That's, you need to spend 42% of your day doing those things.
That was just as interesting as well, what you just said about people sleeping, because some people do, we're not like this at all, but some people deal with stress in a different way, so they do just take to the bed and sleep, and then don't get up. So then I suppose in those situations, because it's the opposite, it's kind of what we talked about in the last episode with your activators, when you're in your hypo and your hyper state, you would have to bring some sort of activation into your life, because that's the opposite of how we deal with stress, but you'd have to bring an activator in there, wouldn't you? So you'd have to force yourself to get up, go for a walk. There was lots of different things, weren't there? Like do some exercise, listen to some happy music, things like that. So that I didn't even think about that sort of situation, because people do deal with stress in that way.
And sleep can obviously serve its purpose, but it can also be a complete avoidance tactic as well. And then if you're just sleeping, you're not actually getting up, dealing with the things that need to be dealt with. So I think there needs to be, it's a mixture of all of those things, isn't it? Although
you kind of have to recognize how you're
going to handle it,
stressful situations, how you deal with them, and then like find out the way you need to
deal with them as opposed to how you're dealing with it. Because you know, you might reach a point where you've got into that much of a burnout that you've had to have some time off work. You know, you're needing to invest in lots of sleep, you're needing to have lots of self-care. But if you're just doing that and you're still avoiding all the things that need to be done, you're not actually getting yourself out of the hole that you've dug yourself in. It's almost like a hole, isn't it? It's like gradually you've dug this hole, you've got into it. I'm sure there's a picture image somewhere where someone's dug a hole and now they've dug it so deep that they physically can't get out of the hole because they're stuck in it. So you need someone to knock a bit of dirt in so gradually you can climb out of it.
Build some steps or something. It's difficult. How can you, so we've talked about spotting signs of it in other people, so how could you help somebody that was dealing with burnout and you could see it, but obviously sometimes people in burnout aren't receptive to it, are they? And they're not receptive to help because they don't want to admit defeat, or they
Yeah.
don't want to admit that they're in that situation, or they can't physically understand how to accept help. So how do you do that without sounding like
Patronising.
patronizing, I suppose?
So I suppose you'd have to do it in a cautious way. So you would tread lightly with it. It might be that you just arrange to have a coffee or a chat with that person.
And maybe not bring it up.
No,
maybe,
I think it needs to come up in a different way, really, doesn't it?
Yeah.
They need to almost come up with it themselves.
Yeah, going out for coffee, asking them if they want to come for a little
How
walk.
are you? You know, how are you feeling?
Yeah, even if it's just like half an hour, like, I've got half an hour, do you want to go and just
You want to go for a walk?
yeah, a little bit of a walk, or do you want to go somewhere nice for a little coffee, or something that doesn't feel like it's going to be intense or draining. Might just help them step out of the comfort zone a little bit.
It's hard, isn't it? Because often when someone is on the verge of, well, not often, but you know, from some of my experiences, if someone is on the verge of a burnout, they're often involved in activities that are not actually helping them. So, for example, they might be in a really stressed state, and their avoidance tactics might be going out getting really drunk, or it might be smoking, or it might be, you know, really not thinking about what it is that they're eating. It might not be good habits with their exercise, because more than likely when you are feeling really stressed, you forget to look after your basic needs,
and you
don't
need that
you?
escapism, but sometimes you're not in a regulative state to understand what that needs to be, so you're like, oh, I'll go out
instead and avoid, and it is avoidance. But then I think it's very difficult to have that conversation with somebody else, and you know, are you going to be that person that says, are you drinking a little bit too much at the moment? Is this actually really helpful for you?
And then you become the enemy, don't you? And then because someone's in a state where they're not thinking clearly, they're like, what's that got to do with her?
I think it needs to be that person needs to come up with that for themselves. And then even, you know, you might need a little bit of time away from certain people or certain, you know, environments, certain situations. And if you've come up with that idea for yourself, you can come back to it, but you need to maybe just have that little bit of time by yourself.
Yeah, it's hard, isn't it?
Because everyone's so different.
Yeah. But that's about you kind of picking up on those.
And it might not be your
changes in
place
your
to say that as well, though. It might not be or it might be.
And you don't kind of want that. No one wants that person that's going to come up to them and be like, look, you're doing this X, Y, and Z, and I can see that that's wrong, and that's making you do this, and that's because you don't need that person to do that in your life, because you're never going to be accepting of it until you're ready to accept it yourself. So I suppose all you want really is to be able to be supportive to somebody, don't you? And tread a bit lightly and know that, think that hopefully that situation is going to come to a head, and they're going to be able to turn to you and say, like, look, I need some help at some point. And you're going to be able to be that person that's there without being intrusive and pushing them away. Because that burnout's come from avoidance, really, hasn't it? Of dealing with the situation.
And what you'll find is someone will often say, yeah, I could see that. Yeah, I could see that you were feeling a bit stressed. Yeah, I could see that you need a little bit of time.
But I didn't want to say anything.
I didn't want to say anything because it's not my place to say. Or, you know, I'm always here for you if you need anything.
Yeah, and then maybe that like initial conversation, once that's happened, then leads to building those stronger bonds in your relationship, and you then become that person that is there for that person, and they feel like they can come to you a bit more because, oh, she did understand and she was patient. Maybe
it's just listening. I think sometimes we're that engrossed with our own lives and what we're doing, we overlook how other people are feeling, or if they start to display different you know, behaviors, because we're that engrossed with your own little world of, well, this is what I've got to deal with, and this is the stress that I've got on my plate at the moment. So it takes a lot just to sit down and have a one-to-one conversation with someone and actively listen to them.
Yeah, and also not being judgmental. So not looking at somebody's situation and thinking, oh, well, that must mean this, or this must mean that, or why they're doing this and that. And the one there probably is, if it's a massive change in personality or a massive change in circumstance, they're going through something that you may be unaware of, and just being kind.
And some people don't want advice. So remember, I'm sure a lot of women can relate to this, or men even, when you've had a new baby, oh my God, how opinionated is everyone? Well, I think that you should do this. I think you should just let them cry, and I think you should do this, and we'll stop breastfeeding them and go on to this. And I think, wow, and I don't think it's done in malice. I think it's done with the idea of helping, but it comes across as judgmental, like you're doing it wrong, this is how you do it right.
Yeah.
And I think we are often quick, and I'm at fault for this, wanting to solve someone's problems.
Yeah.
I'm always in there with a, right, well, this is what you need to do, and you need to make this phone call, and let's do this and let's do that. And don't get me wrong, sometimes you'll have friends that you go to that are going to be more like that.
Yeah.
Let's get things done. I need someone who's going to be assertive, who's going to help me write a list and attack it. But then you also need people that are just going to sit and listen, no judgment, and you're going to come to that solution by yourself. Yeah. And sometimes it needs to be a third party, doesn't it? So it might be that speaking to a friend or a family member, it's not going to work. Maybe you need to go down the speaking to your GP and having a counselling session or some sort of talk therapy. You can ring up and do one of those where you speak on the phone to someone and it's completely anonymous and you're just venting and someone's just listening to you.
Yeah, because you need that.
Yeah, because I think sometimes we are fixers. We want to help someone. We want to help them get out of this problem, and there's not a time frame. So especially like with bereavement, it's not like a couple of months, couple of years you sorted. It's one of those ongoing things which will creep up and bite you when you least expect it. So by being able to ring someone or speak to someone who's completely not related to you in any way, shape or form, you're just talking, and just by someone listening to you can actually make you feel a lot better.
Yeah.
Getting it off your chest.
Yeah, and having those, and maybe arming yourself with a few skills of being able to, when somebody comes to you and you have those conversations, not being forcefully judgmental or forcefully knowledgeable about that situation. I was talking to somebody last week, about some of the different situations that we've been in our lives. And she was like, well, I'm always of the opinion that I'll always ask why. So then we got into a conversation, and at the end of each sort of statement I made about the situation, it was, well, why? And it might have been like, well, why do you think that person's feeling like that? Or why do you think that situation happened? Or why do you feel like that? And do you think that that's true? Or do you think, like, why do you think they reacted like that? Or why? And it was such an interesting conversation, because it made, instead of them going like, totally agree with you, yeah, or like giving me their advice, and it was like making me reflect on the situation and being like, actually, like, I don't know, like, maybe this is why, or like, I've never really thought of it in those ways. So that was quite nice to have a conversation like that.
But then I've also been through, so I had like an NLP session with a friend. And
NLP?
Neuro-linguistic programming. Okay. So it's like a coaching tool, where it's lots of probing questions, and it's really getting you to delve deeper and
that's
understand.
what it was like. It was about probing questions.
And at the time I thought, oh, that's great. And then afterwards, it made me, it was done in an urgency, if that makes sense. Okay. So it was like, well, why? Well, and almost like you had to rush to make these instant decisions and actually it felt a little bit too forceful. And then afterwards, it didn't feel right for me. Do you know? So these things that I was saying, well, why? The answers that I'd come up with, they didn't feel right. I needed a little bit more time to process it and think about how it was feeling. So I think sometimes not asking any questions at all, because then you're switching how you're feeling and the things that you're saying to then switch and answer somebody's question. And it's moving the attention away from what's actually happening with you. And I think sometimes by it's like verbal diarrhea, isn't it? You're just getting it all off your chest. You're just talking about it. I've done it before. So we have, we used to get up at a ridiculous time and do Zooms with a group of people, like this mindset thing. I don't do it anymore. But there's a group of us that still get together on a Thursday morning. We do a Zoom, like 40 minutes, and we just chat. One of the things we talk about is like a win of the week. Another one is like a way to something that we might need help with. And ironically now, every single time we go around the group and we talk about what it is that we need help with, by the end of the conversation of us just venting and just talking about what we're struggling with, we've come to the solution of what it is that we need to do. It's like, I'm really struggling with this and I really don't know what to do, and this is how I'm feeling. And by the end of it, everyone's like, you've just answered your own question. So just having 5-10 minutes of just going, this is my issue, this is my problem, I'm really umming and ahhing about what I should do, I really need your help.
But that's like that, writing it down, isn't it? Getting it out,
pros and cons.
to think about that situation.
So if you're at a crossroads and don't know whether to do this job, I don't know whether to do this job, should I apply for this or whatever it is, writing a list of your pros and cons and thinking about it.
Definitely.
Gives you a little bit of space, a little bit of time.
So there's lots of things we've talked about. We'll post like some stuff that might help you think about different signs of burnout and how you can manage them, and
Coping strategies.
yeah, coping strategies, all sorts of things. Thanks for listening.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, we'll see you soon.
See you soon.